I've been watching with interest how my friends from the software development community react to AI on social media and on other channels. And I've noticed a few patterns that I recognize, that I also kind of went through. And so I'd like to detail a bit on certain phases that I see are emerging as a story for AI adoption. Welcome back to Think Design Work Smart. I'm Alex Bulbach and I'm coming at you from the Mosaic Work Studios. And what I have for you today is a descriptive model of something that I've noticed, and that might explain a little bit what's happening in software development when using AI assistants. First of all, we have non-starter. So what we have on this diagram is actually two axes. One axis is trust in AI autonomy, and the other one is trust in AI output. These are somewhat complementary, although they can influence each other. These are not the only axes that are important. There are also, there could be organizational constraints, there could be money-related constraints, there could be some issues related to privacy. So if you work in an organization and you are wondering how much can you share from the code that you have with that organization, with the OpenAI or Anthropic or these big organizations that do AI. And we will discuss about those as well, but I feel that these two axes are quite interesting. And there are a few non-starters. So the first non-starter, one that I've seen with many, with a few of my friends in the developer community, is a refusal to use LLMs because they are morally reprehensible, they've been trained on stolen data, they give power to billionaires and so on. So there are all kinds of reasons for that. And no, fair enough, we discussed, we have a whole video on ethical concerns with LLM usage, and I invite you to check that out if you are interested in learning more about these ethical dilemmas. But let's go and look at this story that builds up once we look at these two axes. First thing I hear from a lot of developers is LLMs are useless for programming. They cannot do anything because they are not trained on exactly what I'm doing, so definitely they cannot help me. That would be a first statement that we see. And of course, this is placed in low trust in AI output, low trust in AI autonomy. And it's one of the points where you could start. And of course, there are variations on this. Maybe you say, okay, they can generate some code, but not precisely what I need, and so on. Another statement that I see is one that increases the trust in AI output, but doesn't increase the trust in autonomy. LLMs are useful, but only for clarifying. One of the first things that people notice when using agents, when giving them, assistants, when giving AI assistants a good try, is that they are really good at creating clarifying questions for a spec, for a problem, for anything that you pass on to them. And that is very useful skill. It's one of the skills that I didn't expect LLMs to have, but they actually do. So this raises the level of trust in AI output, but not in autonomy. You're still working with an agent, with an assistant, and you're asking the questions, you're in the driver's seat. The next one is LLMs generate good enough code that I can adjust to what I need. So once you start using for specs, at some point, if you become curious about generating code, you start seeing that, okay, it generates some code. It's not great code. It's not perfect. It has some weird, it tends to generate too much code. It tends to add features that you didn't ask for. It could do a lot of things. But if you adjust to the assistant and you start asking it for, just solve this, make sure the code is simple, you start giving it more context, more rules, more guidelines, you can end up with this statement that you can now generate good enough code. And I placing this on a higher level of trust in AI output, because it shows you that it can also generate code. It's not huge level of trust, but it's better than before. And it also increases the trust in autonomy, because once you see that it can generate good enough code, it's a little bit better than before. It doesn't mean that you're ready to leave it do its own thing, but it means that you trust it a little bit more. So that's why we're moving a bit on the axis, on the horizontal axis as well. And then if you use this longer and you start giving it more context, more rules, better documentation, maybe you start generating some documentation, maybe you start feeding into it some generic rules, some guidelines, preferences, and so on, you get to the point where you say, oh, with enough context, I can get the AI assistants to generate the code I need. And maybe it's not 100% what you need, but it's maybe in the 90s. And that becomes more interesting. So with this, you end up at a point where you increase your trust in AI output and a little bit increase in AI autonomy. Because maybe you start thinking right now, oh, if I let it do its thing, then maybe, it will create something good based on everything that I am providing. And of course, there's a lot here. It's about creating skills, for example, that are reusable. It's about setting up CloudMD for your project in a way that works. Maybe you start using coding assistants and you switch from the chat to the coding assistant like Claude Code that integrates in your IDE and reads parts of your code, and you see it starts to figure out more and more on how the code can be written or modified and so on. And with the right practices, so for example, generate a list of tests, review the tests, then implement the tests, then review the implementation, then use the tests to implement the code, and then test the implementation with the tests, and some additional things to ensure that it's not overreaching. Mutation testing comes to mind. Then you can end up at somewhere on this level with you have enough context and I can get LLMs to generate what I need. And this means you are getting higher level now. And maybe there is a level here in between where you say things like, now I don't care that much about the code anymore, but I care about higher level things. And that would be higher trust in AI output within the right constraints and slightly higher trust in AI autonomy, because now maybe you start thinking, what if I would put this into an agent-based system? And this brings us to the next level, which is I can build agents that solve certain types of problems. From my experience, agents are really good at solving problems where validation is can be defined deterministically and can be evaluated, because otherwise things can get gory really quick. But that's good about with agents. when you have this method of working where you have the tests and based on the tests you generate the code, because then you can validate with the code and with mutation testing and so on. So now you can build agents that can solve certain problem types. And this is definitely high trust in AI autonomy, or higher trust. You're just moved on the other side of the fence and you trust the AI output. And then if you give them too much trust and you say things like, okay, let's replace a whole range of people with agents or things like that, you may end up at the point where you say, oh, oops, the agents consumed a lot of tokens and did a really wrong thing, created something that's not useful. And I placed it on infinite trust in AI output, infinite trust in AI autonomy, although it's not there, but it's more up to the right top corner. And then you will adjust and go back to one of the other previous stances. And if you add to this, of course, if you consider the organizations and individuals who benefit from selling AI to you, then of course they will go all the way on the top right and they will tell you things like, oh, this will replace everyone and all the jobs will be lost and only AI will do stuff and so on and so forth. And of course it's in their interest, but you can probably get to solving certain problem types, but not to solving all the problems. So this is an interesting model, and it was fun watching people I know go through this, and they are at various levels because I can see the statements that are close to these levels. And I figured out that we can actually map this on these two axes. With this being said, there are also additional axes. So there's one axis related to budget. How much are you willing to spend? Spending is, if you want the cheapest option, use the chat for everything. If you want a slightly more expensive option, use coding agents like Claude Code. If you go to your own agents in agentic systems, that's where you get really high costs and costs that can increase very, very quickly. So that's kind of the curve. And it's really, it feels like an exponential curve. You can do a lot of things from the assistant, but it's a bit more annoying because you have to drag in the various documents or the various contextual information that you need and explain some of the things about the project and so on, and then copy paste the results into wherever you want them. So it's much easier to use a coding assistant, but coding assistants run in a loops and they spend more tokens. So if you are interested in budget, that's one thing to pay attention to. But we also have another video that talks about how to reduce costs with AI as a programmer. Another thing that you could think about is privacy. And in a way, it can also be related to costs. And in that case, you might consider using a local model. Now, from my experience until now, local models are not as good as the models offered by these organizations. Maybe for specific cases, you can find better local models. And so it's definitely worth checking out. JetBrains has an open model that you could try. I haven't tried it out yet, but I'm really curious to test it. But generally speaking, they are not as good as the existing models. And then the coding agents are a harness on top of that model. Some of them can be pointed to other models than the ones offered by the organization. So maybe you can point them to your local models. But let's not forget, you also need the hardware to run the local models, or pay the cost in latency, because it will take them a long time to answer. So these are my thoughts on this area. And I would definitely look at local models if you are in a highly confidential type of setting and you don't want to send data to anyone. For that kind of work, yes, absolutely use local models. But if you are not in that context, then you can consider using open models instead, even if you need to pay for them. But the other thing is, maybe you don't want to pay these organizations for them, so then run your local models, experiment with them, and let us know what works and what doesn't. I'd be really curious. This being said, this is what I see happening a lot in software development with the AI adoption, and my feeling is that this will go on longer for a year and a half, maybe 2 years, somewhere around that range. And if things still stay as they are, I mean, if these organizations still offer these models at the current prices or close enough price ranges, then we'll see this slow or gradual adoption of AI in software development. And at some point, I expect that one organization or more organizations will start using AI in a different way, and then the whole industry will start moving in that direction. For now, there's also a lot of noise, and particularly a part of the noise is coming from these organizations that want to sell us things, and they tell us all kinds of stuff. And then there's a lot of noise also from influencers who need to invent something new every week in order to stay on top of their social media, and not always is the best thing. Well, anyway, this is where you are. Let me know what you think about all this. Where are you on this graph? Let us know in the comments. Thank you kindly for the view, and until next time, remember to think, design, and work smart. See you next Saturday.